So, because of my skin, you think I don't belong here? Emma's voice cut through the tense silence. I will not be silent while injustice thrives. Colonel Emma Brooks walked into a small supermarket on a peaceful weekend afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona. Dressed in a casual white shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers, she blended in effortlessly with the crowd. No one would have guessed that this unassuming woman had dedicated her entire career to defending her country, leading soldiers on the battlefield. After a long, exhausting day, Emma cherished the simple pleasure of picking up a few essentials in peace. But that peace was soon shattered. At the end of the aisle, a tall man in a police uniform, Officer Ryan Matthews, carelessly knocked over a packet of noodles and a bottle of soda. Emma paused, watching as Ryan barely glanced at the mess before casually walking away, indifferent to the inconvenience he had caused. As a soldier, Emma was trained to pay attention to detail, to take responsibility for every action. The officer's dismissive attitude grated against everything she believed in. She took a step forward, her voice calm yet firm. "Excuse me, sir. You just dropped something. Maybe you should pick it up so others don't trip over it." Ryan turned, his gaze sweeping over Emma with an air of condescension. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "And who exactly are you to tell me what to do?" he scoffed. "I don't have time for trivial things." His arrogance sent a ripple of tension through the store. Customers turned their heads, drawn in by the unfolding confrontation. Emma, however, remained unshaken. "As a police officer, you have a duty to set an example," she said steadily. "Picking up after yourself isn't just about manners. It's about respect for the people around you." Ryan chuckled, crossing his arms. "You seem to think you know a lot about responsibility, but this isn't the army. I suggest you mind your own business." The air in the supermarket thickened. Emma could feel the weight of curious eyes on her, some customers even pulling out their phones. Yet, she didn't back down. Her years of service had taught her one crucial lesson. True leadership wasn't about rank or power. It was about integrity. She met Ryan's gaze head-on, her voice unwavering. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone both calm and resolute. "The way you act now will have consequences, not just for me, but for you too." Ryan scoffed, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. But Emma knew this wasn't just about spilled groceries. This was about something far bigger. And she wasn't going to walk away. Colonel Emma Brooks stood her ground, her gaze unwavering as Officer Paul Smith smirked, exuding arrogance. She could feel the weight of the moment. The tension in the air was thick, pressing in from all sides. Yet, despite the anger bubbling inside her, she refused to lose her composure. "I'm not here to argue," Emma said, her voice steady but commanding. "I'm here to remind you that your actions affect more than just yourself. As a police officer, you should know your responsibilities better than anyone." The supermarket had fallen eerily silent. Shoppers, who had been minding their own business, now stood frozen, their attention locked on the confrontation unfolding before them. Some whispered to each other, others discreetly pulled out their phones, recording every second. Paul's jaw tightened as he realized that all eyes were on him. Feeling cornered, he scoffed and crossed his arms. "Responsibility," he sneered. "And who are you to lecture me? You're just another nobody, another woman who thinks she knows everything. Stay in your lane." His words were sharp, laced with contempt, but Emma did not flinch. She had faced worse on the battlefield, in war zones, where life and death balanced on a razor's edge. A man with a badge and a misplaced sense of superiority was not about to intimidate her. "I don't need you to understand who I am," Emma said coolly. "But I do need you to understand that respect is not optional. If you can't uphold that in uniform, then you don't deserve to wear it." Paul let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "You think you can tell me what I deserve? I'm a police officer. The law is on my side. And you?" He looked her up and down with disdain. "You're just an ordinary woman. You should learn your place before you get yourself into trouble." His words were not just an insult, they were a challenge. But Emma knew better than to let them get under her skin. Instead, she let silence settle between them for a moment, watching him, watching the crowd. The entire supermarket was holding its breath, waiting. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance between them, her voice calm yet sharp. You can think whatever you want about me, but arrogance and disrespect won't protect you from the consequences of your actions. Power does not make you untouchable. And today, everyone here is watching. For the first time, Paul hesitated. The unwavering steel in Emma's gaze chipped away at his confidence. His smirk faltered, and his grip on control of the situation loosened. The supermarket remained still, the air crackling with unspoken tension. The bystanders, some recording, some whispering, were no longer just observers. They were witnesses. Paul clenched his jaw, trying to mask his unease. "You're just causing trouble," he snapped. "If I wanted to, I could have you thrown out of here right now." Emma didn't blink. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the faintest hint of a knowing smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "If you think your badge gives you that kind of unchecked power, then you should prepare yourself for the consequences. You're wrong if you believe I'll be intimidated." The atmosphere in the supermarket was frozen. Two figures stood face to face, Paul, towering, aggressive, armed with authority. Emma, standing firm, unshaken, armed with truth. And in that moment, the power had shifted. Emma exuded undeniable authority. "You may continue to insult me, but remember, I am not alone," she said, her voice calm but weighted. "There are many witnesses here, and if you think you can use words to belittle me, you're wrong. I do not stand here for my personal honor. I stand here for the values I have spent my life defending." The supermarket fell into absolute silence. No one spoke, but through their eyes, Emma could see that they were on her side. Paul, though still trying to maintain his tough exterior, couldn't hide his unease as he realized the situation was slipping out of his control. Emma remained steadfast, a beacon of strength in the storm of injustice and prejudice. As the tension thickened, Paul's frustration turned into aggression. "I'm warning you, don't make this worse," he growled. "I am the police, and I have the right to deal with you right here." His words echoed, but instead of intimidating Emma, they only strengthened her resolve. Slowly, she pulled her phone from her pocket, not in fear, but with deliberate intention. She had anticipated this. "You have your rights," she said, her voice soft yet sharp as steel. "And I have mine. Let's see on whose side the law stands." She dialed quickly, her voice unwavering. "Hello, I need support at the Central Supermarket. There is an officer abusing his power and threatening civilians. I need the appropriate authorities here immediately." Paul's confidence faltered. His eyes widened as the reality of the situation dawned on him. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, some even stopping their recordings to make calls of their own. "What do you think you're doing?" Paul roared, stepping toward Emma. She didn't flinch. Her gaze locked onto his, fearless. "I'm doing what you should be doing, standing for fairness and accountability." At that moment, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The crowd parted as uniformed officers entered. Emma turned calmly, raising her hand to indicate Paul. "This is the man you need to question. His actions have been documented and witnessed by many." Paul, once overflowing with arrogance, now looked shaken. The confidence drained from his face, replaced by uncertainty and fear. Then, as the supermarket doors swung open again, a new figure stepped inside, the mayor Andrew Preston. His presence alone commanded respect, his sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on Emma. The air grew heavier. Paul, now visibly shaken, stammered, "Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything, I just—" "Enough," Andrew interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "I am here because of an urgent call from Colonel Emma Anderson, a person I deeply respect. Your actions have been reported and witnessed. Don't think you can explain them away so easily." Emma remained still, her gaze locked with Andrew's. She had fought battles on the front lines, but this confrontation, in its own way, was just as crucial. The weight of the moment was heavy in the air, but Emma remained composed, her expression unwavering. Justice was unfolding before her eyes, yet she knew this fight was bigger than just one corrupt officer. It was about accountability for all who abuse power. Mayor Andrew Preston stepped forward, his gaze firm yet respectful as he addressed her. "Colonel Anderson, I hope you are unharmed. What you endured today is unacceptable, and I assure you, it will not go unpunished." Emma met his eyes, her voice steady. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Mayor. But this is not just about me. If I hadn't spoken up, how many others would have suffered in silence? This is about ensuring those in power answer for their actions." Andrew turned sharply to Paul, his once arrogant demeanor now shattered. "You have disgraced your badge and the trust placed in you," the mayor declared. "Your abuse of power and blatant disregard for justice will not be ignored." A woman from the crowd stepped forward, her phone extended. "I recorded everything," she said firmly. Andrew took the phone, reviewing the video with a deepening frown. Without hesitation, he turned to the officers beside him. "Strip him of his badge and weapon. Effective immediately. He is suspended from duty pending a full investigation." Paul stood frozen, his usual smugness replaced with disbelief and fear. The officer stepped in, removing his badge and firearm as the crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't just for Emma, it was for justice being served. Andrew turned back to Emma, his expression filled with admiration. "This city needs people like you, people who remind us of our responsibility to uphold integrity. You have my respect, Colonel Anderson." Emma nodded, the fire in her eyes unwavering. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only hope that this leads to real change." Andrew gave a solemn nod. "We will make sure of it." As Emma stepped outside into the bright sunlight, she took a deep breath, knowing this was just one battle in a much larger war. The fight for justice never ended, and she was ready to stand for those who couldn't stand for themselves. Meanwhile, Paul Smith sat in silence, handcuffed in the back of a police vehicle. The arrogance that once defined him had vanished. The same people who once feared him now whispered his name with disdain. At the police station, he was immediately questioned. The weight of undeniable video evidence and witness testimony sealing his fate. By the time the news broke, the city was in uproar. The footage of Paul's misconduct spread rapidly across social media, drawing national attention. Former victims of his abuse began to speak out, sharing their own encounters. The case against him only grew stronger. Within hours, Paul's suspension turned into a formal dismissal. By the end of the week, legal charges were filed against him, including abuse of power and criminal threats. His once proud reputation crumbled, and those who once stood beside him distanced themselves in disappointment. In the quiet of his small apartment, Paul sat alone, his world collapsing around him. The authority he had wielded so carelessly was gone, and for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of true accountability. But for Emma, life moved forward with a newfound purpose. She hadn't sought fame, yet her courage had inspired thousands. Her actions had not only brought justice, but had sparked a larger conversation about ethics in law enforcement. And as she stood tall, she knew this was just the beginning. The world knew her as Colonel Emma Anderson, a woman of discipline, integrity, and unwavering courage. But on that fateful day at the supermarket, she became something more, a symbol of justice. It had started as a simple errand. Emma had entered the supermarket, unaware that she was about to face a test of her principles. Paul Smith, a corrupt police officer, had been harassing innocent people, using his badge as a tool of oppression rather than protection. When he turned his aggression toward Emma, assuming she was just another ordinary citizen, he made a fatal mistake. Emma did not shrink in fear. She met Paul's gaze, her voice calm but firm. "You may continue to insult me, but remember, I am not alone here. There are witnesses. And if you think words will intimidate me, you are mistaken. I stand here not for my personal honor, but for justice." The supermarket fell into silence. Paul, sensing the shift in power, tried to assert control. "I am the police. I have the right to deal with you right here," he barked. But Emma had already pulled out her phone. "And I have my rights too," she said, dialing a number. "Let's see whose side the law truly stands on." When the authorities arrived, they did not look at Paul as an ally. They saw a disgrace to the badge. Mayor Andrew Preston himself stepped in, his presence commanding. "Paul Smith, you have abused your power and insulted an honorable military officer. You don't deserve that uniform," the mayor declared. Paul was stripped of his badge and weapon on the spot. The crowd erupted in applause, not just for Emma, but for the justice she had restored. Paul's downfall was swift and public. Videos of his misconduct went viral, sparking outrage. People who had suffered under his abuse came forward with their own testimonies. The police force, under scrutiny, underwent reforms. Training programs emphasized ethics and accountability, and Emma was invited as a keynote speaker at law enforcement seminars. She stood before hundreds, not to bask in applause, but to remind them of a fundamental truth. Power is only meaningful when used to protect, not oppress. Meanwhile, Paul faced the consequences of his actions, not just losing his job, but also standing trial. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the weight of his mistakes. He had believed himself untouchable, but Emma had proven that no one was above justice. Emma's legacy. Despite the media attention, Emma remained humble. She did not see herself as a hero, only as someone who had done what was right. But the world saw her differently. Her story inspired a movement. People who had once been silent found their voices. Women, minorities, and everyday citizens who had suffered injustices now had a symbol of resistance in Emma Anderson. She continued her military service, never seeking fame, only determined to ensure that justice prevailed. Years later, when people spoke of Emma, they didn't just recall the day she stood against corruption in a supermarket. They remembered the movement she started, the fearlessness she inspired, and the truth she defended. Justice must not be a privilege. It must be a right, and it is worth fighting for.